India is the fastest adopter of solar energy, also is the fifth largest solar installer in the world. This has been possible because of government initiatives, be it tax holidays, subsidies on solar panels, and bodies like MNRE. To share his insights on the solar industry, we have with us Mr. Deepak Gupta, who's a former Secretary MNRE and Honorable Director General NSEFI. So welcome to ET.com.
Thank you.
So we've come a long way since the solar mission launched in 2010 to 2019. Do you think the approach that India is following, it's in the right direction? What are your thoughts?
I think in general, I must compliment the Prime Minister for bringing solar into the forefront of not only the clean energy and sustainable development drive in India, but also globally. And this is because of the very ambitious targets that he has set, and also for leading the formation of the International Solar Alliance. But the targets that he has set are very ambitious, and it's a complex matter. So we may not necessarily achieve these targets, but the intention is very clear. And I think in general, the initiatives of the government have propelled a very fast adoption of solar energy. But as we go along, there may be need to tweak things here and there in order that we are able to sustainably develop further. And in that situation, perhaps we will have to address the situation of manufacturing of solar in India.
As you're talking about the targets, we know the targets have been revised, and even in the past, India has been able to overachieve the targets. The earlier target was 25 gigawatt. It was achieved in lesser time, and now we stand at around 30 gigawatts. That was achieved before time, but things have changed in the last 2 to 3 years. Like if you look at the subsidies have come down substantially. So do you think we're still on track, as you were saying, that we might not be able to achieve the targets? Even I would quote a CRISIL report which said that India might be able to manage only 60 gigawatt by 2022. So how do you look at that, and what is your viewpoint? You said manufacturing has to be looked at.
Yes.
What else can be done?
Well, you see, when we started the solar mission, the price of solar was 17 rupees. So at that time, even a target of 20 gigawatts was considered very ambitious. Subsequently, in the next few years, the price has dropped dramatically, which allows us to install much more. After all, the DISCOMs have to buy this power and then supply it to you and me. 60 gigawatt, which we may achieve, appears that we have not achieved our target. But if I say that it is thrice the target that was adopted, and by itself is a huge number, and especially compared to other countries, then it's a very tremendous achievement. One should not underestimate this achievement. And targets sometimes are settling paths, trying to give an intention of one's mind how I should proceed. It's to help people redouble their efforts. So I don't think our objective should only be to achieve our target, and we have to develop solar sustainably.
Absolutely. You talked about the cost. If I'm not wrong, India has been able to achieve the lowest, record low cost, and you said when it was started, it was 17 rupees per unit. Now it stands at around 2.44 per unit. But will India be able to sustain this kind of costing? Because there have been some hurdles, there have been some policy changes. If you talk about the anti-dumping duty on solar panels, this has increased the cost of solar panels in India.
I think let us look at it at two ways. First, we'll keep the issue of the duty aside. 244 was the lowest cost in India because of a very special project in an area where solar is good. It had a lot of incentives built in to reduce risks. So people were able to bid low because there were little worries. So that should not be the standard for judging other tenders. The price of the modules and cells varies as per the global demand and the manufacturing in China. So it may vary. And I think the very sustainable cost at this time, depending upon the location in India or the size of the project, could be anywhere between 260 to 320. The prices rise. What is your load at this time? How much time do you get to install? These are all. What is the rate at which you are getting your finance? All these are factors which influence prices. So somewhere around 260 to 320 is probably for the next couple of 2-3 years, and then we'll have to wait and watch. Now, if you add duties, certainly the prices will increase to that extent, whether it's on cells or it's on modules, because at this point of time we are mostly importing these cells.
Right. There have been other developments also. GST is one big policy development. How do you look at it, and how has GST affected the solar industry?
I think this has to be looked in two ways. One is any new tax which is introduced when projects are already on the ground creates a problem, whether it will be added or not, and then you have to seek exemption, etc. So the process has to be very clear. This created some problems. Secondly, the amount of GST that is being put and the manner in which it is being interpreted, there are problems. It is raising cost and adding transaction costs. So I think it is not helping, it is hurting. And this matter has been raised with the GST Council. Some changes have taken place, but I hope that they will resolve this matter once and for all.
Right. But already GST has completed 2 years. You think there's been some clarity from the point we started and now at the point we stand at?
Some improvement, but full, because let us not go into the technical part of it, but there is some improvement still to be done. And these are issues which policy has to set right. Because there are many other issues today which are creating a problem for solar, and this relates almost entirely to policy uncertainty or flip-flops. Right. You may have heard some state is not paying, there are huge dues developed, some state is renegotiating PPAs, some is putting new guidelines retrospectively, some is curtailing power. All this affects the finances of the developer, and they introduce elements of risk. The greater the risk, the higher will be that cost on the tariff, right, and the greater the reluctance of new investors to come in. So we have to sort these matters out, and both the center and the states have to do it.
Right. In fact, you spoke about investors. There's a query in my mind I would like to ask you, that among the manufacturers and those who are into the business of solar, there's a lot of competition in terms of the tariff, and that is why this has become one of the reasons of not being able to reach at a larger population. So how do you look at this about the competition which is there, existing competition among the solar manufacturers, and also how do you look at the scope of solar in rural India?
See, the competition I think is on solar developers,
right,
because we have not many manufacturers. India started the auction process. Earlier the global regime was FIT, F-I-T, fixed tariff. Auction has led to competition, competition has led to reduction in prices. So in that way competition is good, but it is not good if people go out of their way to win a bid. The other problem has been that the government has capped the tariff. That has also restricted competition. So we need to have open-ended competition, and the greater the number of participants, the results would be better. And therefore, I am of the view that if our project sizes are smaller, then perhaps the competition will be greater and this problem will be automatically resolved. The second part that you have mentioned, and I think people in this country must realize that solar provides us a historic opportunity which was never available before of producing power at the point of consumption, increasing farmer incomes, setting up a system which will enable losses of discoms in rural areas to vanish, unbelievable as it may seem, and provide for eventually 24-hour electricity to our villages. And therefore, for example, I am arguing that we should have solar projects at the tail end of the distribution system, because we will generate at the point of consumption. We don't need a huge transmission infrastructure. And I am arguing that we should have, say, replace in a period of 5 to 10 years all the electric pumps for irrigation by solar pumps, because then I don't have to supply electricity at a loss. And they will supply, they will set up projects and supply back to the grid from which I will give them income. So I hope the government has started a Kusum scheme which initiates this. There are some implementation issues which I hope will get resolved, but that is the place where we need to go in a big way, and maybe then we can do our 100 gigawatt or the 250
Absolutely.
gigawatt.
In fact, I would like to know your views on how sectors like MSME benefit from the solar industry's growth.
See, I think if we talk of rural solar, and if projects are set up in rural areas and with farmers, big companies cannot do it. So it will have to be MSMEs. If we have to go big in solar rooftop, go to all the towns of India, big companies cannot do it, MSMEs will do it. So I am a firm believer that if we increase our targets in these two areas, MSME sector will get a huge growth, and it will also create a lot of employment, and employment in areas where it is needed most, because big projects, they don't create much employment. But the small ones will do, because you require technical people to install and to maintain and to look after. So here is a golden opportunity for MSME sector. Actually, solar can lead that growth.
Right. In fact, one last question I would like to know. You talked about solar rooftops, but if you look at the breakup right now, solar farms, they majorly contribute in comparison to the rooftop solar systems. Do you think the trend will remain the same in the coming years, or it might just change?
No, I think the trend will change, and in my view, it has to change. We have a lot of land problems.
Right.
So big solar farms, that will remain a problem, especially when we are looking at very huge quantities, 400, 500 gigawatt. And we have to build expensive transmission systems, which is also a problem. Solar rooftop is generating where I am consuming the electricity. So I will save in the transmission, I will save in the cost, quality of electricity will be better. So eventually, we have to go decentralized and downstream. So I am also arguing therefore that other people have to start thinking about this, like architects. I must now design my buildings in such a way that solar automatically becomes a part of it. And then 5 kilowatt into millions of houses will mean 100 gigawatt.
So there's a long way to go.
Long way to go, but I think the direction should be quite clear. Solar is our future. There are no two ways about it.
Thank you so much for your time. That's all for now. For more extensive coverage on renewable energy, stay with economictimes.com.